Lisa. Over the last few weeks, we've all experienced a lot of shortages, whether it's been paper products or cleaning products. More recently, I think if we haven't already, we're in for a shortage coming in meat. Hair color, that's one, I can't believe that people didn't see that one coming. Although I did see lots of hair color at my local grocery store this morning, so maybe it's not as bad as it might be. But at any rate, there are a lot of things that we can't buy or we have to hunt for. But one of the saddest things I heard recently is that there's a shortage of sympathy cards. I'm sure it's because people know people who have unfortunately died of the COVID-19 virus. And also, there are many of us who can't go to funerals because there's no funeral or there's no visitation, which is what we do here in my area. There's usually a visitation either right before the funeral or the night before the funeral, where you see the family and pay your respects. We don't have those things going on right now because we have a restriction on the number of people, and it could be quite a while before those sorts of events happen. So people are turning to the sympathy cards to pay their respects, and apparently there's a shortage. Now I've bought my own cards for more than 10 years now, and I haven't bought any cards, so I don't know whether there's a shortage in my area or not. But I thought that it might be a good time to do some videos on making sympathy cards. And of course you can use a lot of the same techniques that you use for any card, but I'll share with you what I typically do when I make sympathy cards. And I'm going to make several. I'll do this video, I'll just kind of make a card. When I like that one, then I'll stop and make another one and videotape it and just put it all together into one video. But I've pulled a bunch of supplies, so I'll show you the kinds of things that I'm starting with. I don't have a lot of stamps that say something about sympathy. What I frequently do for sympathy cards is I make thinking of you cards, because then they don't have to be sympathy cards. They could be for if someone's ill or just need a lift. So I'll have some with both of those things on there. So anyway, that's what I use for the outside of the card. For the inside of the card, sometimes I'll leave it blank, or I may print out a Bible verse or find a greeting online. If you're making cards for yourself, you can do kind of whatever you want. If you're going to sell them, of course, be sure that you are using things that you are authorized and allowed to use on the inside of your cards. And you don't have copyright issues. But anyway, I'm just going to be making cards for myself or cards that I give away. So these kind of greetings for the outside. Some of the stamps that I have pulled out, background stamps, work really well, and there are several techniques that I think make a nice card, because when I'm doing a sympathy card, I want it to be very flat. I don't want a lot of layers. I think it's too fussy if it has bunches of layers. I do have some ribbon laying out here because you can just put a flat layer of ribbon across. It'll be easy to mail. It won't look too fussy and too fancy. So I just want to keep it simple. So I've got a couple of background stamps. I also have my favorite kinds of things to use for these cards are nature images, either flowers or trees, things that are really generic, like this has got berries on it and sort of a branch with leaves on it. This is one of my favorite sets, and this has a pretty thinking of you greeting. It's an old Stampin' Up set. It's just, everything right here is discontinued. I have a new stamp set that I was just using in another video that also works really well. This is just the greetings or friendship, but the image here would work great for a sympathy card. These kinds of things I think make beautiful sympathy cards, work for men or women, and they have the appropriate somber feeling to them without being, I think, just too somber. We'll put it that way. You can use other images. Sometimes I'll see cards with butterflies on them. Butterflies to me are a symbol of life, and I typically don't put them on a sympathy card, but if you want to and you feel comfortable with that, that's certainly something that you could use. I don't usually do a lot of designer paper. I usually do more stamping techniques with my sympathy cards, especially when I'm going to be working with background stamps. So we'll see that kind of thing. If I were using designer paper, I would use something with a simpler tone-on-tone kind of design for my papers. I did pull out one 6x6 pad. This is an old one. Fall papers, I think, work very well, and this is a fall set. But there's not tons of stuff here that's left in it. I wouldn't do that. That's too, I don't know, too happy looking to me to be a good sympathy card. I think that one would work well. So I don't know that I'll use any of these, but just to give you an example of what I would use if I were doing a sympathy card. So I'm going to start making some different ones. I have an idea for this background stamp. It's an old one, I think from Hero Arts, of a leaf design. You know, probably have something in your stash that's kind of an all-over leaf design or any kind of all-over design for a background card for the ideas that I have to do with this. And this is a great opportunity to pull out some of your older products if you have a lot of ink pads that you haven't been using, or you have things like I do, like the old stamping pastels, watercolor crayons and stuff like that. You can do a lot of interesting techniques and make a pretty background and put a greeting on it, maybe a piece of ribbon, maybe not, and have a nice looking card, because it's really more about the fact that you have reached out to somebody rather than showing off, oh, what a great card I've made. It's just to have something subtle that, you know, they can see that it's handmade, but it's really more about what you've writing on the inside and that you reached out at all. So that's my viewpoint on sympathy cards. So let's get started. I'm going to do a card and a couple of cards, see if I like them, and if I do, then I'll start adding them to the video, and hopefully we'll get a few done through this video, or maybe series of videos. So for our first card, this is probably the simplest card you could ever make. And I didn't glue this on because there's a couple of mistakes, so I'm going to make a better one. But I have a simple cardstock background. I have a piece of white cardstock that's cut 1/4 inch smaller, so it's 4 inches by 5 1/4. And I'm using cardstock that I got at the office supply store. I don't mind if it has a little bite to it as opposed to the super, super smooth stuff that you get from somewhere like Stampin' Up, because I'm going to be adding some pastels or chalks to this. But you could use, you know, whatever white cardstock that you have. So anyway, all I've done is I've added an image, and then I've put my greeting on it, and that is all it needs. And it's a really pretty, simple sympathy card. So let's do a new front that looks similar to this, but better. All right, I'm taking some scrap paper, regular paper, and I'm tearing it into strips. And I'm going to lay those strips, let's see, I don't think I love that one. And I'm going to lay those strips across the top and the bottom and the sides of my paper. So I can see how much I'm going to have. And then I'm using Versamark ink, inking up my stamp. Good. And we'll just press this onto white cardstock. Set that up. Remove the papers, and this is where I'm using stamping pastels. But the pastels work really well. You don't even need any embossing powder or anything. You just need a couple of cotton balls, and I happen to be working in greens, but you could work in any colors that you wanted to do. So I'm going to do 4 different shades of green, and I think my next one is doing some blues. Alright, now, so this was a more subtle look, this is a little bit bolder look, but you still get the same kind of idea. Now I need to decide what's the top and what's the bottom. I think I want this to be the bottom, and I'm going to take Deepest Sympathy, which disappeared. There it is. Fell off. Okay. Some gray ink. And there we go. And I just glue this onto this, and I have a pretty sympathy card that's something that's a simple design and will still convey my feelings, and it's, you know, you can kind of tell looking at it that it's a handmade card that's not a fussy handmade card. Now you could do one other thing if you wanted to, and I'm going to use my other one to show this. If you wanted to add a little bit more texture to it, you could use something like liquid pearls and just do a drop of them. They work well on this design because it already has these dots. Just a little bit of shine. It out. So I wouldn't necessarily put them everywhere, but just a little bit along underneath, and if you tap the bottom, that'll sort of flatten them. But that would need to dry, and that would add just a little bit of texture and make also a pretty card. I like that, but I like it just as is, so I don't really feel like it needs anything else. It just needs to be glued together, and I have a card. So that's Sympathy card number 1. I'm also not worried about the fact that if a little bit of it didn't catch, it's supposed to be graduated in, so that's fine with me. So that's our first card. Let's move on to another card using a background stamp. I'm going to work with this stamp, and we're going to use several different inks. And this time I am going to work with the liquid pearls. So I'm going to go ahead and open these so they'll be handy. Using the old Baja Breeze and Bermuda Bay and Not Quite Navy. These are all discontinued colors. You could use any 3 colors that created a monochromatic look, graduating from the lightest to the darkest. So I'm going to turn my stamp over, and it'll be important to kind of orient. I want my design in the upper left corner, so I'm going to stamp it so that I'm actually working on the right side of the paper. Okay, just put that aside, and we'll start with the lightest color, the Baja Breeze. And I'm going to go all the way around this. This is a circular design. You can go corner to corner, but since it's circular, I kind of want to get, as if I were stamping it in the middle, I want to get it so that it's light to medium to dark. And this is the hardest part, is getting this. And I'm going to huff on it. So it's good and wet. And we'll take our card, press that there, and then I need to use something, scrap piece of paper, to press down really good. And there's my design. And, you know, I could try different versions. As I've done it a couple of times, and sometimes I get more dark and sometimes I get more light. But you get this graduated design. And then to do, let's see, I want the darkest one to do Thinking of You. And this is one where I considered doing some ribbon. I had this blue ribbon here, but I felt like it's okay. It just makes it a little bit jazzier, and I'm doing Sympathy card, so I think that I'll leave the ribbon off. But one thing I do like for this is the liquid pearls. And so I'm going to put some in the middle, and then there's lots of opportunities here for these on this design, but I'm just going to do these points so I don't overdo it. Oops, this one. And we'll let that dry. And I am missing just a little bit there, but I happen to have the marker that matches this. So I can fill in. They are handmade, they don't have to be perfect. And then I will attach that to this blue background when the liquid pearls dry. It's another simple card, nice. The monochromatic kind of color schemes work really well for these kind of cards, and then they don't end up being too bold, busy, flashy. They just end up being a little bit more subtle. So I was about to glue this on when I remembered that I happened to notice here that I did have some designer paper that was a perfect match, and that, unlike that ribbon, is a subtle addition. So I trimmed a piece of this down, and I'm going to add it to the bottom. So now we have that card. So we're going to work on this card, and this uses a single design stamp and a greeting message and one color of ink, and we're just going to use the stamping off technique, which I've probably used before, and it's super easy, and I need some kind of scrap paper to lay this on. And I changed my orientation here. I was kind of wanting to do them all in a portrait orientation, because then when I did the insides, I just have to print them all one way. This one, I think, just looks a lot better, this orientation. But you could do yours all one way, and then when we get to doing the insides, that'll be a little bit easier. Pick out the techniques you like for one direction. Alright, I'm going to do a stamped image. Oh, okay, I did a lousy job stamping that image, so we're going to turn that over. Right, and stamped image. And then we're going to take this and we're going to go ahead and stamp off to the side. Okay? And pick up some more ink. We're going to do one more, maybe just a little bit lower. And then a stamp off. And another stamp off. And I need one maybe right over here on the edge, but I want it to be like 2 or 3 versions out. So that's how I get, that same image just in shaded colors. And what I'm going to do is I would take my ribbon and I would wrap that around it. This is again the card cut this white card cut a little bit smaller than the main background. So I would just take this and wrap it around, and I use just Scotch tape. And I want to put my greeting up at the top. Any kind of ink that you want to use. And this greeting and this stamp both came out of this old stamp set. It's a discontinued stamp set. I think this was like a hostess set called Kind and Caring Thoughts. It's a really old one. But all you need is one sort of basic stamp design and just repeat it, but use the stamping off method. And then it just needs a backing. So I would just glue it to this, and I'm ready to go with that card. Super fast. So I have 3 cards so far, and my 4th one is going to use a new set called Beautifully Braided. I think this is in the Stamping Up Spring catalog, so I don't know how long it's going to be available. But again, it can be any similar image for this. And we're going to use this, and I'm going to work with my Tim Holtz stamping platform. I think that's what it's called. I've had this so long I don't remember now what they call the thing. I think it's something, I can't remember if it's called stamping platform, something to that effect, that you use with your stamp. And it can work with clear or with rubber stamps. And right now I have mine set up to rubber. So I need to take this off and turn it around so that the clear side is showing up, and that puts the stamp closer to your paper that way. And what we'll end up doing is taking a card. This is not cut quite the right size, but it'll give us an idea of what we want. So we want it something like, I don't think I want it quite in the middle. I think I want it to one side for what I'm going to do. And that'll pick up the image. So I'm going to make a sample one, and then we'll come back and we'll do one together. Now for this card, just ignore this part down here at the bottom. I tried a little stamping tech, adding a little stamp down there that I just didn't like. So we're going to do something a little different down at the bottom of the card. The idea behind this is you have a stamped image and then you've popped up a more detailed part of the image. So it's stamped twice. And you can stamp it on the same color paper. I decided to do the green on green and then do the green on white and color that in. But I'm going to bring the whole thing down just a little bit on the paper. I think that will look better, and then I'm going to do a little bit something different down here at the bottom. So let's set that stamp aside. And I already have this on here, and I want it, as I say, a little bit further down on the paper. So I'm using the mark. When I originally did the first one, I had this at a 1/2 inch. I'm going to have it at 1 inch. And I have to adjust my paper because my stamp kind of goes a little bit lower than I would, than I kind of need it to be. And I can use this to hold my paper in place. So let's ink this up with Distress Oxide Peeled Paint, the ink I'm using. This is a current ink, as opposed to a lot of the stuff, discontinued stuff I've used. Any, in this case, green on green would work. The advantage of this kind of board is if you don't get a good ink the first time, you can stamp over it a second time. And I got a good one the first time. So we'll set that aside. And we'll take a piece of white paper. And I'm going to end up cutting this one up. So it doesn't make too much difference where it falls. In fact, I really just need the top. So what I'm going to be doing is cutting out a prominent part of the design. And I would have liked to have cut something out in the middle, but that just didn't work with this design. So I'm going to end up cutting out something up here at the top. And I'm going to go ahead and color it in first, and then I'll trim it out because it'll just be easier to handle the paper if it's a little bit larger. So we have that colored in, and I'm going to take my Stampin' Up cutter. That out there. Oh, I'm going to end up having to color a little bit right there. Okay. Now, so this is going to lay on top, and I just want to sort of match it up. This looks really cool. Now, I think this needs a backing to it, but I have used the smallest size of this. So what I'm going to do is cheat a little bit, taking some brown paper, paper piercing tool, and I'm going to use my paper piercing tool to sort of draw around. This is actually an awl, dressmaker's awl, but I use it as a paper piercing tool. And that will mark my place. And then I can take regular scissors, I think these are sharper ones, and just cut it out, because I want a rough edge to it anyway. Now you could have cut out a circle. If you didn't have the right size circle cutter or punch, you could have cut out a circle with a die cutting system. I was just lazy and didn't want to do that, for one thing. So this is that old distressing tool that Stampin' Up! Used to sell. And for what I'm doing, this kind of works. Right? This makes it a little bit larger, and then I'll still be able to line it up. So I'll glue this on, and with that glued on, I'm going to use some dimensionals for the back, where this is going to go so it fits the design. Yeah, that looks cool. Okay, now what we want to do then is add the message over here. And the message I'm adding is, I'm sorry. And it's not my favorite one. I kind of like Thinking of You or Sympathy ones, but it was one other option I had in messaging. So I'm going to try it for this one. My favorite, but it fits that space really well. So now at this point, since I've moved this down a little bit, I thought I would like that better with it moved down. I thought I'd like that better with it moved down. Now I've kind of got this space up here at the top. What I was planning to do was to put some old twine across the bottom. Now I don't think I need the twine across the bottom. I think I need something more at the top. So I think we're going to take a punch. I've had this out here for a while and I haven't used it yet. I think we're going to take the, ooh, I can't do that. That is a challenge. Alright, so I could run a ribbon across the top. This is experimenting. Yeah, I don't want it to get too fussy. I think that it would be better to, it's usually when something like this, it's better to quit before you get carried away. And this is now all in greens and browns, so it's sort of monochromatic with the brown being neutral. So this is the card that I ended up with. I went ahead and redid this one with it stamped a little bit higher and then put the trim on the bottom of it. I didn't love this one that much. It's okay, but I think that I like this arrangement a little bit better in the end. So still the same idea of popping up a portion of the design, kind of highlighting that by stamping it twice and coloring in one section of it. So then what I need to do is add some greetings to these. Now, one thing you can do is keep your orientations all the same. If I had done them all portrait, then it would have been really easy for me to just print out something to put inside of all of them and make it all the same size and orientation, but I did end up with one of them as a landscape design. So what I would do is just glue this inside. I chose a Bible verse and just simple message, and then I could write in whatever else that I wanted to add. And of course, if you had a stamp that you could use for an inside message, that's great. I just don't really have anything for sympathy cards. So this is just an easy way to go ahead and get something to go on the inside for each of these. So that's what I've done for these 4 sympathy cards. We had the first one using, in this case, the chalks. You could do like an embossed design and then go over it with inks. That would work for the same kind of look. This one with graduating various colors onto a stamp and a message and just a touch of designer paper. Little ribbon here, stamping off, so I just used one stamp repeatedly. Really fast card. And then this last one took just a tad more time. All of them in a monochromatic kind of look, simple. It's all about just expressing the sympathy message, not really a fussy card, not a look at me, you know, I'm such a great card, just something pretty and serene, and that's what I was going for with the 4 cards that I created. So thanks for joining me today, and if this video is well received, then I may do another one because I still have a bunch of stamp sets here that I haven't used that are still out here on my table. So I got to get back to my sewing machine right now, but perhaps we'll do some more cards in the near future. Thanks for watching.